Hello. Recently, I read with my online book club Joyce Oates' most recent novel, Butcher, and there are some scenes and aspects of this novel which are incredibly disturbing. Oates doesn't shrink from going to very dark places in her fiction, but it got me wondering, what is the most disturbing books that I have ever read in my life? So I want to make a video talking about the books that first come to mind for me when thinking about very dark subject matter. And I'd be really curious to know in the comments below, what are some of the most disturbing books that you have ever read? Now, what do I mean by disturbing books? I guess it's not just psychological and physical violence that occurs in the text or kind of horror in a kind of fantastical way, but it's more about when humanity sinks to its lowest levels, and you see the really disturbing places that people can go to in their life, and the consequences of when people don't care about other people and just use them, abuse them, and the results are really disturbing. This really upsets me, and that is the case in Butcher itself, which is disturbing for a number of reasons. So, like, first off, this takes place in the 1800s in a female lunatic asylum, and traces the life of a doctor and this self-styled physician's diaries about the experiments that he conducts on vulnerable women, people who are patients of this asylum, but also indentured servants who work there, and so we follow a number of the experiments he conducts in the name of trying to advance the study of gynecology, and so we see in graphic detail the experimental operations he performs on many different women, and we see that in that's represented in graphic detail in the text. So first off, yes, that is horrible to read about, and also on babies. Sometimes he conducts early on in his career, he conducted a number of experiments, and so that is incredibly disturbing in itself to read. But then also disturbingly, it shows how a number of these women are obviously, a lot of the patients don't have their full faculties or sense of reason to be able to either willingly submit to these experiments to treat conditions that they have, and so they're being taken advantage of in this way. And then there are also a number of women who object to being operated on in this way, but are either drugged or rendered unconscious often by members of their family or their husbands, and are so forced to submit to these experimental operations and just wake up a time later having had this treatment, and often these operations lead to either like severe issues physical issues that they have to then live with for the rest of their lives, or from their deaths, and this resulted in a number of deaths, and then finally I think the most disturbing thing about this novel is realizing how much medical science is based on early experimentation on human subjects like this, and the real moral issue involved because in order to actually advance science, experiments need to be conducted on human subjects. You can test out things on animals, but that doesn't always directly correlate to how human bodies work, and so thinking about how much medical science is based on experimentation like this, and how many victims there have been of the past, who just were so unfortunate to have been born in a certain time period when there still wasn't the medical understanding to know how to treat conditions like this, and how much misogyny has been a part of the medical profession for, throughout the whole history of it. And so Oates has talked about in interviews how the doctor at the butcher at the center of this novel, Silas Weir, who that's his character name in this book, but he's kind of a composite of a number of different doctors from the 19th century that conducted experimentations on the bodies of women like this, and how quite often in the research she conducted of actual experiments that occurred in history, what those experiments and those operations and the results of them were much more horrific than what she actually portrayed in this novel, which is disturbing and terrifying in itself, what is actually portrayed in the book. So just like imagining how so much of this has occurred in history is incredibly upsetting and disturbing. And it's also really disturbing to think about how, in certain areas of the world, operations like this are still being carried out. There's still a lot of misunderstanding, especially about the bodies of women, and which seems so, insane, that of how long humans have been around, how long medical practice has been around, and there's still so much misunderstanding about this and mispractice which is occurring in different parts of the world. And so yeah, this novel is disturbing on a number of different levels, but is also quite effective in raising awareness and asking questions and about these larger issues, and to do with the past and history, but also the present and the way that women's bodies are managed in this way. Now, when anyone asks me what is the most disturbing book you have ever read, the book that immediately comes to mind is The Road by Cormac McCarthy, because this story has one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever read about, and one of the scenes that I've found most chilling when reading it. So it follows a father and son in a kind of post-apocalyptic landscape as they are traveling down a road to try to find either a community or safety or resources that will allow them to survive and persist. And there is a scene in this where the father and son find this like kind of underground layer and try to see if they can actually go down into this, if there's anything that will be helpful or useful to them there. And I won't give any spoilers, but what happens there and the way it is written, how Cormac McCarthy frames this scene is absolutely chilling. It terrified me. And I remember so vividly the experience of reading this and being frozen in place and absolutely entranced and horrified and disturbed by the story. So there's that scene in this book, but then also obviously the entire story itself and following this post-apocalyptic landscape, where it's just completely decimated, and the environment, but also civilization in general, and people are living a very desperate. Those who continue to survive are living an incredibly desperate existence, and so following their journey, but also the incredibly touching and beautiful relationship between this father and son. I mean, I think that almost heightens the level of disturbing factor of this book, that their relationship is so loving and touching, and how he presents that in just very sparse dialogue between them, but in a way which evokes all of this emotion while they are in this incredibly desperate circumstance. It is it is horrifying. One of the novels of recent years that I've found most disturbing, and I know a lot of readers found the content of this novel really shocking, is Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh, another writer who is not does not shrink from going to very dark places in her fiction. So this is set in a medieval landscape, and which is overseen by a governor, a kind of feudal lord who is incredibly evil, and there's no other way to describe him, but in many ways resembles or could be related to a lot of leaders in the world who are really tyrannical and completely egotistical. And there are scenes in this book that include murder and rape and incest and masochism and regurgitated sausages. One of the most disturbing parts of this book is when the central character is set a task of trying to eat as many sausages as he can, and just the experience and the way it portrays that scene and what the consequences of that is so gross and disturbing. But yeah, there are many more scenes in this book that are also very disturbing in many different ways. And again, I think Ottessa Moshfegh is doing something very, very clever in this novel and how it could be related to modern day society, but also, yeah, looking at the depths at which humanity can go and what happens to people that are so obsessed by power and are so feel so self-justified in their position that they can just use and abuse people as much as they want to, more for their own amusement than for any practical reason. Yeah, it is incredibly disturbing. A novel that really affected my sleep in that I had very vivid nightmares after reading it is Harvest by Jim Crace. This depicts an agricultural community in a kind of, I think it's a uncertain time period, but how someone enters this community, and it's about the way that this community tries to survive and defend themselves against outsiders. And there's just a really unsettling atmosphere to this book of how constrictive it can be being part of a community, but then also there are benefits to it. And so it's looking at this issue of community in a really complex way, but there is just such an unsettling atmosphere to this book, which then results in a number of really disturbing scenes, and which just really affected me somehow, on a really unconscious level. So while I was reading it, I found it incredibly tense, but then afterwards also found it just really reverberating in my consciousness in this way, so that it affected my sleep in such a powerful way. And I'd be really curious to hear if you've ever had any disturbing dreams or nightmares after reading a particular book. A novel which is incredibly disturbing in the sense that there's a kind of slow build-up of story and character, which leads to a climax which is absolutely shocking, is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. And this author is really interesting in how she explores the lives of characters who feel a sense of alienation and feel a sense of distance from other people in general, and so the central character of this book, when she is a child, she has a relative who together they form this bond, and they have this belief that they are aliens that have come from another planet. And even though as they grow up, they grow distant from each other, the central character maintains this idea that she is an alien and she doesn't belong in this place. And it works up to this scene where both she and her relative have returned to their family home. And what happens towards the end of this book is so incredibly shocking, really startled me I didn't see it coming at all, and what happens is horrifying, and it was interesting when this book first came out. The publisher invited me and a number of other of readers online to create a video where we read the end of the book while being filmed, and so it captured our expressions and our initial reaction to experiencing this incredibly disturbing scene. So yeah, this book really stands out to me for that reason. And finally, there are a few novels which are more on that level of showing the disturbing sense of the depths that humanity can go to, and the ways that people can use and abuse and neglect each other and really deny other people of their humanity. So one book that has really stood out to me, and I think is an incredible piece of literature, is Vista Chinesa by Tatiana Salem Levy, who's a Brazilian writer, and she was inspired to write this book based on the case of a friend of hers who was raped. And so this story is a confession and letter where the central character, she's writing to her children about an experience which has traumatized and affected so many aspects of her life. When on one occasion she was going for a jog in a park, and a man attacked her and raped her, and the consequences of this have stuck with her in such a disturbing way, and really affected her consciousness and way of living, and her inability to enjoy life, that it's just something that has always stuck with her. And so obviously cases like this of sexual assault really affect and traumatize people throughout their lives. And the way that this story depicts this really gave me an understanding of it, and really tapped me into this experience in a way that I don't feel like I have in any other fiction, and so was incredibly disturbing in this way. But also I felt, really it gave me, broadened my understanding of this subject matter, so there's the attack itself in this novel, which is incredibly disturbing, but then also disturbingly her trying to find justice in the aftermath of this, of trying to find the perpetrator and to see him be arrested and convicted, and the difficulty of working with the police in Brazil at this time. It was it's so disturbing how difficult it is to find and achieve justice in this way. And so I think this novel works on a number of different levels of showing how things like this can occur in our lives and in society, and how difficult it is to find justice, and how difficult it is to persist after the event of an assault and a traumatic event like this. Another novel that I found incredibly impactful and disturbing on this level is Bolla by Pajtim Statovci, and this follows a relationship between two men, and how that relationship is warped and twisted by larger political conflicts, and also social divisions in society, but also about human frailty itself, and the consequences of that. So it follows two young men. One is Serbian, one is Albanian, and they have an affair, but then their lives are broken apart by the Kosovo War, and we follow one man in particular as he moves around, as he tries to survive, but he maintains this sense of love, and he kind of idealizes the relationship he had with this other young man before the war, and dreams of getting back together with him. And we follow the consequences of when they do meet again, and how they have both been changed because of this conflict and because of what they've had to do to try to survive throughout this time period. And it's incredibly disturbing what happens in their relationship of how the people that closest to us that we feel like we love so much, sometimes they can become more ideas in our minds rather than actual people. And so then being confronted with the actual person, that can disturb this sense of love that we've built up over time, and how this novel traces the breakdown of that and the consequences of that is so upsetting. I mean, it's kind of heart crushing as well as disturbing, and I think that's the case with a lot of these later novels. That it's just so emotionally terrifying how where human nature can take us, like very dark and disturbing places that it can take us, and the realistic consequences apart from this sort of idealized sense of how human relationships should work. And so, yeah, I think this novel is incredible in the way that it traces that and portrays that. And finally, there is the novel The Parcel by Anosh Irani, which is incredibly disturbing in the way that it portrays how social and political conditions can make individuals who are inherently good perform very evil actions and on other people. And so the story is set in India. It follows a character named Madhu, who is born intersex, who is raised by their family as a boy, but then when Madhu becomes an adult, lives as a woman and joins a hijra community of other trans and intersex individuals. And part of Madhu's job working at a brothel is to induct other people who are becoming prostitutes, specifically children and girls. And so, yeah, incredibly dark, following Madhu, who has been assigned a girl that has just been sold by her family to this brothel to become a prostitute. And Madhu has been charged with psychologically and physically breaking down this girl to become compliant and to become a prostitute. And it is so upsetting and disturbing in this way. But following Madhu's journey and relationship with this girl, as different events occur, it's so harrowing and disturbing. But also, just in case you're wondering of how that this novel might be too disturbing and upsetting to read, it does end on a slightly hopeful note, or at least as hopeful as can be with conditions like this. But the way it portrays how this is occurring in the world, this is happening, and how it is testifying to that, I think is so incredibly powerful, but also so maybe could be classified as sobering, as well as disturbing, and portraying the events that it does. And so it's a novel that's really stuck with me, and I think one of the most incredible books that I've read in the past decades. So those are some of the most disturbing books that I have ever read, or at least that immediately come to my mind when I think about other disturbing books. But I'd be really curious to hear if you have read any of these books, or if you want to let me know about some of the most disturbing books that you have ever read. I would be really interested to hear about that in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well, and staying and not too disturbed by the sound of any of these books, and maybe even would be interested to try them out for yourself. Because I'd love to hear what you think about any of these books as well. But take care. I hope you're reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye bye.